Reims, France, July 4th, 1965, Independence Day. The irony was lost on no one. The French countryside thundered with the sound of American V8 Fury as Bob Bondurant downshifted through the chicane at the Circuit de Reims. Behind the wheel of chassis CSX2601, the Shelby Cobra Daytona Coupe that would make history, Bondurant's right foot buried the throttle pedal as the 289 cubic inch Ford small block roared to life. The exhaust note echoed off the stone walls of ancient Champagne vineyards, a mechanical war cry that would silence the prancing horses of Ferrari. This was the championship coupe, chassis CSX2601. Its biggest claim to fame was that it was the Cobra Daytona that, by winning the GT third category at Reims on July 4, clinched the 1965 World Manufacturers' Championship for Shelby American. The moment was electric. 50,000 French spectators had come to witness endurance racing's longest day, expecting another Ferrari coronation. Instead, they were about to witness the first American constructor victory in FIA World Championship history. Jo Schlesser, Bondurant's co-driver and French racing legend, felt the car beneath him. The Daytona Coupe was no ordinary machine. Where the open Cobra Roadster had struggled against Ferrari's 250 GTO at tracks demanding high speeds, this closed coupe was a revelation. Peter Brock's wind tunnel-tested design had transformed the brutal Roadster into a high-speed predator. The aerodynamic revolution was measurable in numbers that mattered. Top speed had jumped from 150 miles per hour to over 180 miles per hour. Lap times at Riverside Raceway showed the coupe was 3.5 seconds faster per lap than the Roadster. On the long Mulsanne-style straights of Reims, those numbers would translate into championship points. The crowd could hear it before they could see it. That distinctive Ford 289 sound signature, deeper and more aggressive than Ferrari's silky V12 seconds, announced the Cobra's arrival long before it appeared through the trees. Racing at 6,800 revolutions per minute, the small block was producing approximately 385 horsepower through its Weber downdraft carburetors, headers, and race-prepared internals. The engine management was primitive by modern standards, but deadly effective. No computer controls, no electronic aids. Just raw American muscle refined through Carroll Shelby's relentless pursuit of speed. Bondurant could feel the championship slipping away from Ferrari with every corner. The mathematics were brutal and beautiful. Shelby American needed this GT-class victory to secure enough points to dethrone Ferrari in the FIA International Championship for GT manufacturers over 2,000cc division. Ferrari had owned this title. Ferrari had owned European racing. Ferrari had owned the respect that came with World Championship status. Not anymore. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than. The pit signals confirmed what Bondurant already knew. The Daytona Coupe was running flawlessly, staying ahead of the Ferrari 250 GTOs that had terrorized the GT ranks for years. The Ford 289 that critics had dismissed as crude American iron was proving its endurance at the highest level of international competition. No blown engines. No mechanical failures. Just consistent, devastating speed that would rewrite the balance of power in world motorsport. As the sun began to set over the Reims circuit that Independence Day evening, the sound of America's mechanical rebellion grew louder with each passing lap. The 289 Cobra Daytona Coupe wasn't just winning a race. It was ending an era of European supremacy and announcing the arrival of American engineering on the world stage. Ferrari's V12 seconds were being systematically silenced by the thunder of Detroit iron wrapped in California innovation. The championship fight that had consumed the entire 1965 season would be decided in the next few hours. Ferrari's mystique, built on decades of Grand Prix victories and sports car dominance, faced its greatest challenge from an unlikely source. A Texas chicken farmer turned race car constructor who had dared to challenge the establishment with raw horsepower and revolutionary aerodynamics. The sound that echoed through the French countryside that July evening was more than just an engine at full throttle. It was the sound of automotive history being rewritten, one thunderous revolution at a time. Europe in 1965 was a continent intoxicated by the smell of racing fuel and the roar of competition engines. From the ancient banking at Monza to the punishing forests of the Nürburgring, the FIA World Sports Car Championship had become the ultimate proving ground for automotive supremacy. These weren't just racetracks. They were cathedrals of speed, where national pride hung in the balance with every lap time, every championship point, every moment of mechanical triumph or failure. Monza was a true cathedral to speed, unmatched around the world for its sense of history and passion, fueled in part by its long history and also the fanaticism of the Italian fans, the Tifosi. The Autodromo Nazionale Monza, built in 1922, stood as Europe's oldest purpose-built racing circuit on the mainland. It was the world's third purpose-built motor racing circuit after Brooklands and Indianapolis, and the oldest in mainland Europe. But by 1965, Monza had evolved into something far more significant than mere asphalt and concrete. It had become the Temple of Speed, where Ferrari's prancing horse logo flew from every flagpole, and Italian passion reached levels that bordered on religious fervor. The grandstands at Monza told the story of European motorsport in 1965. Packed with tifosi wearing Ferrari red, waving flags that bore the prancing horse, screaming in Italian dialects that needed no translation. These fans didn't simply watch races. Is less than #0. 5# is greater than they live them. Every gear change, every overtaking maneuver, every mechanical failure was felt in their bone. The atmosphere was electric, intoxicating, and utterly intimidating to any constructor foolish enough to challenge Ferrari on Italian soil. But Monza was just one stop on the championship calendar that would determine the fate of nations in 1965. 600 miles north, through the Alpine passes and into the German Eifel Mountains, waited a circuit that had earned the nickname Green Hell from the bravest drivers of the era. The Nürburgring had a history and tradition which was intertwined with that of motorsport itself. The Green Hell, as Jackie Stewart so memorably described it, had been thrilling and terrifying drivers in equal measure since 1927. The Nürburgring Nordschleife was not a racetrack in any conventional sense. It was a 12.9-mile monster that wound through forests and valleys, climbing and diving through more than 170 corners and 1,000 feet of elevation change. Every turn had a name. Every straight had claimed victims. Every lap was a confrontation with mortality that separated the truly gifted from the merely brave. German precision had built this circuit, but German engineering would not guarantee survival. The Nürburgring demanded respect from every constructor, every driver, every mechanical component that dared to challenge its brutality. At the Nürburgring in 1965, the paddock atmosphere was markedly different from the passionate chaos of Monza. German efficiency ruled. Mechanics worked in precise formation. Timekeepers recorded lap splits to the 10th of a second. Spectators gathered in organized groups, analyzing cornering techniques and braking points with the methodical intensity of military strategists. This was where engineering met the ultimate test, where theoretical horsepower figures became meaningless and only proven reliability mattered. Across the Atlantic, the 12 Hours of Sebring had established itself as America's premier endurance test. The bumpy former airfield in Central Florida attracted the world's greatest constructors to prove their machines against the punishing concrete runways and brutal heat. Sebring was different from the European circuits, raw, unforgiving in ways that had nothing to do with elevation changes or corner complexity. The surface itself was a weapon, breaking suspension components, destroying wheel bearings, and exposing every weakness in chassis design through 12 hours of relentless pounding. But it was Reims, the circuit de Reims-Gouet, that would serve as the championship battleground in 1965. Built on public roads through the French countryside, Reims was a high-speed circuit that demanded aerodynamic efficiency above all else. The long straights through the Champagne region stretched for miles, allowing cars to reach their absolute top speeds before heavy braking zones tested the limits of tire grip and brake cooling. Reims was where the Cobra Daytona Coupe's aerodynamic advantages would matter most, where Peter Brock's wind tunnel work would translate directly into championship points. The spectacle of European endurance racing in 1965 transcended mere competition. These events were cultural celebrations that attracted not just racing enthusiasts, but entire communities. Fans arrived days before races, setting up elaborate camps in the infields and forests surrounding the circuits. Local merchants sold race programs in 6 languages. Radio commentators broadcast lap-by-lap coverage to audiences across multiple continents. The sound of racing engines became the soundtrack of summer weekends across Europe. In the paddocks, the atmosphere was a mixture of technical precision and barely controlled chaos. Teams from different nations worked side by side, sharing fuel pumps and tire-changing equipment while guarding their setup secrets with military intensity. Mechanics wore white cotton overalls marked with oil stains and brand logos. Engineers walked between the cars with clipboards, recording tire temperatures and suspension settings that would determine success or failure over hundreds of racing miles. The pre-race rituals had evolved into theater. National flags were raised behind each team's pit area. Drivers walked the grid in driving suits that identified their nationalities as clearly as their racing numbers. Technical inspectors examined engines and safety equipment with the solemnity of priests conducting mass. The starting procedures followed protocols established decades earlier, when racing was considered a gentleman's sport and mechanical failure was accepted as the cost of pursuing ultimate speed. Ferrari's dominance in GT racing had established expectations that bordered on inevitability. Glance at the stats, and there's no doubting the Ferrari 250 GTO's competition record. More than 50 race wins between 1962 and 1965. The 250 GTO had become more than just a racing car. It was a symbol of Italian engineering superiority, European sophistication, and the natural order of international motorsport. When Ferrari 250 GTOs appeared on the starting grids across Europe, victory was not hoped for but expected. The Ferrari mystique in 1965 was built on more than just race results. It was cultural supremacy wrapped in brilliant red paint and powered by the most beautiful engine sounds ever recorded. The Colombo V 12 inches, the 250 GTO produced a musical note that opera composers envied, a mechanical symphony that announced Italian superiority with every blip of the throttle. European racing fans had been conditioned to associate that sound with victory, with style, with the proper order of the motorsport universe. Against this backdrop of European tradition and Ferrari dominance, the arrival of American constructors was viewed with skepticism that bordered on amusement. The Shelby Cobra roadsters that had appeared at various European circuits were respected for their brutal acceleration, but dismissed as crude instruments unsuited for sophisticated endurance competition. American V8s were powerful, certainly, but they lacked the refinement, the engineering artistry, the cultural pedigree necessary to challenge European supremacy on European soil. The 1965 season would test every assumption, challenge every tradition, and rewrite every expectation that European motorsport had established over 40 years of competition. The stage was set not just for a championship battle, but for a cultural revolution that would change the balance of power in world motorsport forever. The transformation began with a racing driver's heart condition and ended with a world championship that silenced Ferrari. Carroll Shelby's journey from the cockpit to the Constructors' Championship started with a medical diagnosis that would have destroyed a lesser man's dreams. Instead, it redirected those dreams toward building the most feared GT racing machines in the world. Carroll Hall Shelby, born January 11, 1923, had established himself as one of America's premier racing drivers before heart problems forced his retirement from active competition. Once joking that if he had been better at raising chickens, he never would have resorted to Plan B of building and racing cars, Shelby's transition from driver to constructor was driven by necessity and fueled by an uncompromising vision of American automotive supremacy. The chicken farm in Texas had failed. The racing career was ending. But Shelby possessed something more valuable than either agricultural success or driving talent. He understood speed from both sides of the equation. As a driver, he knew what separated winning cars from also-rans. As a businessman, he recognized the commercial potential of translating racing success into road car sales. The combination would prove devastating to European competition. Shelby American Incorporated began operation in 1962 from a modest shop in Venice, California. The location was deliberate. California in the early 1960s had become the epicenter of the American automotive rebellion. Hot rodders, custom builders, and performance enthusiasts had created a culture that valued horsepower over heritage, innovation over tradition. It was the perfect environment for an audacious plan to challenge European supremacy with American muscle. The plan was elegant in its simplicity, but revolutionary in its execution. Shelby had identified the fundamental weakness in American sports car development, the lack of a proper chassis to handle serious power. European constructors like Ferrari, Porsche, and Jaguar had decades of experience building lightweight, sophisticated chassis. American manufacturers built powerful engines but wrapped them in heavy, crude platforms designed for straight-line acceleration rather than balanced performance. The solution required an alliance that would have seemed impossible just years earlier. AC Cars, a small British manufacturer based in Thames Ditton, Surrey, had been building the AC Ace since 1953. The Ace was everything American sports cars were not: lightweight, perfectly balanced, sophisticated in its handling characteristics, and beautiful in its proportions. But it was also everything British cars typically were: underpowered, unreliable, and commercially unsuccessful in the American market. AC Cars was facing extinction. Their Bristol inline-six engine was being discontinued, leaving the company without a suitable power plant for the Ace chassis. This crisis of supply became Shelby's opportunity for revolution. The marriage of British chassis sophistication with American engine power would create something neither nation could have achieved independently. Ford Motor Company provided the mechanical heart of the revolution. The 289 cubic inch small block V8 had been introduced in 1963 as part of Ford's commitment to performance marketing. Unlike the heavy, cumbersome big block engines that dominated American muscle cars, the 289 was compact, lightweight, and perfectly sized for installation in the AC Ace chassis. The specifications told the story of American engineering efficiency refined to its essential elements. The Ford 289 displaced exactly 4 to 1,007 to 136 cubic centimeters through a bore and stroke combination of 4.0 inches by 2.87 inches. This square configuration provided the perfect balance between high revolutions per minute capability and torque production. The compression ratio of 10.5 to 1 in race trim demanded high-octane fuel but delivered the power output necessary to compete with Ferrari's sophisticated V12 engines. In street tune, the 289 produced between 271 and 306 horsepower depending on carburation and internal specifications. In competition trim, with race-prepared internals, ported heads, and Weber downdraft carburetors, power output climbed to approximately 385 horsepower at 6,800 revolutions per minute. The Weber carburetor installation was crucial to the 289's racing success. Unlike single four-barrel carburetors used on street engines, the racing 289s employed multiple Weber downdraft units that provided more precise fuel metering and better throttle response. These Italian carburetors, ironically, would help American engines defeat Italian cars on their home circuits. The Weber installation also required a specialized intake manifold that positioned the carburetors low in the engine bay, improving the center of gravity and aerodynamic efficiency of the complete package. Headers replaced the restrictive cast iron exhaust manifolds used on street engines. The racing headers were hand-built, free-flowing systems that extracted maximum power from the 289's exhaust gases while contributing to the distinctive sound signature that would become the Cobra's calling card. The exhaust note was deeper and more aggressive than Ferrari's V12 seconds, announcing American power with a mechanical voice that Europeans had never heard before. The engine management was primitive by modern standards, but perfectly suited to 1960s racing requirements. No electronic controls, no computerized engine management, no sophisticated monitoring systems. The 289's operation depended entirely on mechanical precision and the skill of the mechanics who maintained it. This simplicity was actually an advantage in endurance racing, where complex systems became failure points and mechanical reliability determined championship results. But the Roadster chassis, despite its sophistication and power, was not enough to challenge Ferrari's dominance at high-speed European circuits. The open-body configuration created significant aerodynamic drag that limited top speed and destabilized the car at racing speeds. At Le Mans and similar circuits with long straights, the Cobra Roadsters were consistently outgunned by Ferrari 250 GTOs that could achieve higher terminal velocities despite having less horsepower. The solution came from Peter Brock, a young designer whose aerodynamic innovations would transform the Cobra from a powerful roadster into a championship-winning racing machine. Brock's Daytona Coupe design was the result of extensive wind tunnel testing and aerodynamic analysis that was revolutionary for a small American constructor. The closed body reduced drag by approximately 18% compared to the Roadster, while improving high-speed stability through better airflow management. The aerodynamic improvements were measurable in performance terms that mattered on racetracks. Top speed increased from approximately 150 miles per hour for the Roadster to over 180 miles per hour for the Daytona Coupe, with appropriate gearing. At Riverside Raceway, lap time showed the Coupe was 3.5 seconds faster per lap than the Roadster, is less than -0.5 is greater than on European circuits. With long straights like Reims and Monza, these improvements would translate directly into championship points. The Daytona Coupe retained the 289 V8 and the essential chassis characteristics that made the Roadster successful, but wrapped them in a body that was optimized for high-speed competition. The design was both beautiful and functional, combining Italian-influenced styling cues with American pragmatism. The result was a machine that looked as fast as it was, a visual statement of American engineering ambition that European competitors could no longer dismiss. Ferrari's response to the Cobra threat revealed the depth of the challenge Shelby had created. The 250 GTO, Ferrari's primary GT weapon, had been refined through years of competition experience and represented the pinnacle of Italian automotive artistry. The Colombo V12 engine produced approximately 300 horsepower through 3 Weber carburetors and 6 individual throttle bodies. The sound was magnificent, the engineering was sophisticated, and the racing pedigree was unmatched. But pedigree could not overcome physics. The Cobra's superior power-to-weight ratio and aerodynamic efficiency were creating performance advantages that Ferrari could not match without fundamental redesign. The 250 GTO had achieved more than 50 race wins between 1962 and 1965, establishing Ferrari's reputation for GT supremacy. But those victories had come against competitors that respected European tradition and accepted European performance standards. Shelby American respected nothing and accepted no limitations. The 289 Cobra represented a fundamentally different approach to racing: maximum power and minimum weight, optimized for winning rather than style, engineered for results rather than reverence. The cultural implications were as significant as the performance advantages. American engineering was challenging European sophistication on European soil, using European rules, and winning consistently. The 1965 season would test whether raw American power, refined through California innovation and British chassis expertise, could dethrone the most successful sports car constructor in racing history. The stage was set for a championship battle that would determine more than just racing supremacy. It would establish whether American automotive engineering deserved respect on the world stage or would remain dismissed as crude power without sophistication. The 289 Cobra Daytona Coupe carried those expectations into the 1965 racing season. Every race would be a test of national automotive pride. Every victory would challenge decades of European assumptions. Every championship point would measure American ambition against Italian tradition. The chicken farmer from Texas was about to silence the prancing horse of Ferrari with the thunder of Detroit iron wrapped in California dreams. Ferrari's dominance in GT racing had become so absolute by 1965 that victory was no longer a question of if, but by how much. The Ferrari 250 GTO had won the International Championship for GT manufacturers in 1962, 1963, and 1964, establishing a dynasty that seemed unbreakable. 3 consecutive world championships had elevated Ferrari from mere competitor to the undisputed ruler of international GT racing, transforming every race weekend into a coronation ceremony where the only uncertainty was which Ferrari would claim victory. The numbers told the story of Italian supremacy with mathematical precision. More than 50 race wins between 1962 and 1965 had established the 250 GTO as the most successful GT racing car ever built. European racing journalists didn't even pretend objectivity anymore. Ferrari victories were reported as natural phenomena like sunrise or rainfall, events so predictable that the only newsworthy element was the margin of dominance. Enzo Ferrari himself had become larger than motorsport, a figure whose approval or disapproval could determine the fate of entire racing programs. Il Commendatore ruled from Maranello with the absolute authority of a medieval prince, dispensing factory support and official blessing to drivers and customers who demonstrated proper reverence for the prancing horse. His cars didn't simply win races. They established the cultural and aesthetic standards by which all other racing machines were judged. The Italian press treated Ferrari victories as national triumphs that confirmed the superiority of Italian design, Italian engineering, and Italian automotive culture. La Gazzetta dello Sport devoted entire sections to Ferrari's racing exploits, analyzing not just the technical specifications but the artistic elements that separated Italian thoroughbreds from foreign pretenders. Victory belonged to Ferrari by natural right, confirmed through decades of racing excellence that no other constructor could match. European racing establishment had constructed an entire mythology around Ferrari's dominance. The V12 engine was described as the only proper power plant for serious competition, its musical exhaust note representing mechanical refinement that crude American V8 seconds could never achieve. The 250 GTO styling was celebrated as automotive sculpture, perfect proportions that demonstrated Italian aesthetic superiority over functional but soulless foreign designs. Even Ferrari's racing organization was mythologized, portrayed as a precision instrument operated by maestros who understood the subtle arts of competition in ways that American cowboys never could. Against this backdrop of established European superiority, the arrival of Shelby's Cobras was met with reactions that ranged from polite skepticism to open ridicule. European racing journalists dismissed the American cars as crude hot rods that might provide momentary entertainment but could never threaten serious competition from properly engineered European machines. The Cobra Roadsters were acknowledged as brutally fast in straight lines, but European critics insisted that raw power without sophistication would always fail against refined engineering and decades of racing experience. British racing publications were more tactful but equally dismissive. Autosport acknowledged the Cobra's impressive power output but questioned whether American engineering could produce the reliability and refinement necessary for endurance racing against Ferrari's proven machines. The Roadster's crude suspension, primitive aerodynamics, and agricultural engine were criticized as fundamental limitations that no amount of horsepower could overcome. French racing journals were particularly harsh in their assessment of American racing ambitions. L'Equipe described the Cobras as machines that mistake noise for sophistication and brutality for engineering excellence. The French press had witnessed multiple American attempts to conquer European racing over the years, all ending in mechanical failure or driver error that confirmed European assumptions about American automotive incompetence. German racing publications applied their characteristic technical precision to dismantling American racing pretensions. Motorsport Total analyzed the Cobra's specifications and concluded that, while impressive on paper, the American machines lacked the systematic engineering approach that characterized successful European racing programs. German critics noted that the Cobra was essentially a hybrid creation, combining British chassis architecture with American power, suggesting a fundamental lack of cohesive design philosophy. The cultural implications of this European dismissal extended far beyond racing results. American automotive engineering in 1965 was still viewed as competent for domestic consumption but inadequate for international competition. European critics acknowledged that Americans could build powerful engines and comfortable road cars, but racing demanded subtlety, refinement, and engineering artistry that American manufacturers had never demonstrated at the highest levels. The 1965 International Championship for GT manufacturers was contested by Grand Touring cars in 3-engine capacity divisions, with the over 2,000cc division representing the most prestigious class where Ferrari faced its greatest challenge. The rules were deceptively simple, but created a complex mathematical battlefield where championship points would determine world supremacy. The FIA's championship structure divided GT cars into three distinct categories based on engine displacement. The 1300cc class was dominated by smaller European manufacturers building sophisticated but limited machines. The 2000cc division attracted manufacturers like Porsche, who had perfected the art of extracting maximum performance from efficient engines. But the over 2000cc division was where national automotive pride was truly tested, where the most powerful and prestigious machines competed for ultimate bragging rights. Championship points were awarded based on finishing position in each class, with additional points for overall race placement, creating a complex scoring system that rewarded both class dominance and outright speed. A manufacturer could accumulate championship points by winning their displacement class even if faster prototype cars finished ahead overall. This structure meant that Shelby's 289 Cobras would compete directly against Ferrari's 250 GTOs for over 2000cc supremacy, while potentially scoring additional points for high overall finishes. The mathematics of championship competition were unforgiving. Every mechanical failure, every driver error, every strategic mistake would be measured in points that determined world championship status. Ferrari entered the 1965 season with massive advantages in experience, factory support, and driver talent that had delivered 3 consecutive championships. Shelby American faced the daunting challenge of not just winning individual races, but accumulating enough points across an entire season to dethrone the most successful constructor in GT racing history. The psychological pressure was immense. Ferrari carried the weight of expectation that victory was predetermined, that their superior engineering and racing pedigree made championship success inevitable. European fans, journalists, and competitors had been conditioned to believe that Ferrari dominance was the natural order, that challenges from foreign constructors were temporary distractions that would eventually be crushed by Italian superiority. Shelby American carried different pressures, but equally demanding expectations. American automotive credibility was at stake. Is less than #0, 5 hashes greater than, the domestic industry had achieved massive commercial success but remained dismissed as crude and unsophisticated compared to European engineering excellence. Every race would be a test of whether American power could overcome European refinement, whether Detroit iron could silence Italian sophistication. The stakes transcended individual race results or championship points. This was cultural warfare disguised as automotive competition. Ferrari represented centuries of European automotive tradition, artistic sensibility, and engineering refinement. Shelby represented American innovation, raw power, and the audacity to challenge established hierarchies with superior performance. The 1965 season would determine whether European racing supremacy was based on genuine superiority or merely cultural prejudice, whether American engineering deserved respect on the world stage or would remain dismissed as powerful but primitive, whether the sound of Ferrari's V12 seconds would continue to define racing excellence or be drowned out by the thunder of American V8 seconds. Every lap would measure national pride. Every victory would challenge decades of assumptions. Every championship point would determine the future balance of power in world motorsport. The stage was set for a battle that would reshape automotive history. Ferrari's dynasty faced its greatest threat from an unlikely challenger who had dared to bring American ambition to European soil. The prancing horse of Maranello was about to discover that the roar of a Texas Wildcatters rebellion could be louder than 3 decades of Italian racing supremacy. The systematic destruction of Ferrari's GT supremacy began on a cold February morning in Daytona Beach, Florida. February 28, 1965. The Continental Daytona 2,000-kilometer race would mark the opening shot in a championship campaign that would rewrite the balance of power in world motorsport. What happened over the next 8 months would transform Carroll Shelby from ambitious upstart to world champion, and reduce Ferrari's GT program from unstoppable force to historical footnote. The Daytona International Speedway represented neutral territory where American organizational efficiency met European engineering sophistication. But neutrality was an illusion. Every European constructor knew that victory at Daytona carried psychological implications beyond championship points. An American triumph on American soil was expected. A European victory in America would demonstrate global superiority that transcended home field advantages. Chassis CSX2299, the first competition Daytona Coupe, carried the burden of proving Peter Brock's aerodynamic theories against the stopwatch. Jo Schlesser, Harold Keck, and Bob Johnson shared driving duties in the blue and white machine that would establish the template for championship success. Chassis CSX2299, the first competition Daytona Coupe, carried the burden of proving Peter Brock's aerodynamic theories against the stopwatch. Jo Schlesser, Harold Keck, and Bob Johnson shared driving duties in the blue and white machine that would establish the template for championship success. The trio represented international cooperation. Schlesser brought European road racing experience, Keck provided American endurance expertise, and Johnson delivered the mechanical sympathy necessary to preserve equipment through 12 hours of high-speed punishment. The mathematics of endurance racing demanded perfection across multiple variables simultaneously. Engine reliability, aerodynamic efficiency, tire management, fuel consumption, brake cooling, and driver consistency had to align for 12 consecutive hours without significant failure. The 289 Veit-inches CSX2299 was producing approximately 385 horsepower through Weber downdraft carburetors and free-flowing headers, but power meant nothing if mechanical components failed under sustained high revolutions per minute operation. The Daytona Coupe won the GT class and finished second overall, establishing immediate credibility for Brock's aerodynamic design and Shelby's championship ambitions. More importantly, the victory demonstrated that American engineering could produce the reliability necessary for endurance competition against European specialists who had perfected the art of 12-hour racing. The psychological impact was immense. Ferrari's European supporters could no longer dismiss the Cobras as powerful but fragile machines that would inevitably fail when subjected to sustained competition pressure. The celebration in the Shelby American pit was measured but significant. Winning at Daytona represented the first step in a championship campaign that would require consistent excellence across multiple continents and racing conditions. But the victory also confirmed that the 289 Cobra Daytona Coupe possessed the fundamental capabilities necessary to challenge Ferrari's dominance. The aerodynamic improvements had translated into measurable performance advantages, and the Ford small block had proven its endurance capabilities against international competition. 3 weeks later, the championship battle moved to Sebring International Raceway for the 12 Hours of Sebring on March 27, 1965. The former Army Air Forces training base in Central Florida had evolved into America's premier endurance racing venue, attracting the world's greatest constructors to prove their machines against the brutal concrete surface that had destroyed countless mechanical components over 14 years of international competition. Sebring was different from Daytona in ways that would test different aspects of the Cobra's capabilities. Where Daytona rewarded aerodynamic efficiency and engine reliability, Sebring demanded suspension, durability, and mechanical strength. The airport runways had been connected by rough concrete sections that subjected cars to sustained punishment that exposed every weakness in chassis design and component selection. The Daytona Coupes executed a GT-class sweep that demonstrated depth as well as speed. Bob Bondurant and Jo Schlesser won the GT class in the number 15 Daytona Coupe, with sister cars filling additional GT podium positions. The sweep was more than just a racing result. It was a statement of engineering superiority that Ferrari could no longer ignore or dismiss. The technical significance of the Sebring victory extended beyond championship points. The race had proven that multiple Cobra Daytona Coupes could maintain competitive pace simultaneously, suggesting that the performance advantages were systematic rather than the result of one perfectly prepared machine. Ferrari's traditional response to American challenges had been to dismiss them as isolated incidents that would not be repeated when faced with sustained European competition. The Sebring sweep made such dismissals impossible. European racing journalists were forced to acknowledge the reality of American competitiveness, but their coverage remained grudging and defensive. British publications noted the Cobra victories while emphasizing the primitive nature of American circuits and the lack of sophisticated European competition at Sebring. French journalists acknowledged the results but questioned whether American machines could maintain such performance on demanding European circuits that tested driving skill as well as mechanical capability. The championship battle's European phase began at the Autodromo Nazionale Monza on April 25, 1965. The fourth 1,000-kilometer race of Monza took place on April 25, 1965 at the Autodromo Nazionale Monza and represented the ultimate test of American credibility. Monza was Ferrari's cathedral, the sacred ground where Italian engineering superiority had been demonstrated for decades. Victory at Monza would prove that American power could overcome European sophistication on European soil is less than #0. 5 is greater than. Allen Man Racing Run Daytona Coupes took first and second in GT Plus 3.0, with Bondurant Grant finishing P8 overall and Sears Whitmore P9 overall. The victory was devastating to European assumptions about American automotive competence. Ferrari had been defeated at Monza, in Italy, by American-built machines powered by Detroit engines and operated by a combination of American and British drivers. The crowd's reaction told the story of cultural shock as clearly as the lap times recorded mechanical superiority. Italian fans had come to Monza expecting Ferrari dominance and European vindication. Instead, they witnessed the systematic dismantling of Italian racing supremacy by machines that represented everything European critics had dismissed as crude and unsophisticated. The sound of American Weizsäckens celebrating victory at Monza was a mechanical insult that reverberated through European motorsport. The psychological impact of the Monza victory extended far beyond the immediate championship implications. Ferrari's mystique had been built on the assumption that Italian engineering represented the pinnacle of automotive artistry, that proper racing cars required European sophistication to achieve consistent success at the highest levels of competition. The Cobra victory at Monza shattered those assumptions and forced European racing establishments to confront the reality of American engineering competence. 6 weeks later, the championship caravan moved north to the Nürburgring for the 1,000-kilometer race on May 23, 1965. The Green Hell represented the ultimate test of driver skill and mechanical reliability, a 12.9-mile monster that had claimed countless victims and established reputations through 4 decades of motorsport history. European critics insisted that the Nürburgring would expose the fundamental limitations of American racing machines that had achieved success on simpler circuits. Bob Bondurant and Jo Schlesser won GT Plus 3.0, finishing 7th overall, with Jack Sears and Peter Sutcliffe second in class. The victory was particularly significant because it demonstrated that American machines could master the most demanding circuit in the world while maintaining the mechanical reliability necessary for championship competition. The Nürburgring victory proved that the Cobra's success was not limited to high-speed ovals or simple circuit layouts. The championship mathematics after Nürburgring showed Shelby American building an insurmountable points advantage over Ferrari in the GT Manufacturers' Championship. But mathematical certainty required one more victory to eliminate any possibility of Ferrari recovery through late-season mechanical failures or strategic miscalculations. The championship would be decided at the Circuit des Reims on July 4, 1965. The Circuit des Reims represented the perfect venue for championship-clinching victory. The high-speed circuit through the French countryside demanded the aerodynamic efficiency that Peter Brock had built into the Daytona Coupe design. The long straights would allow the 289 Ford V8 to demonstrate the power advantages that had been refined through months of competition development. The 12-hour format would test the reliability improvements that had been systematically implemented throughout the season. Bob Bondurant and Jo Schlesser won the GT Plus 3.0 class in a Shelby Cobra Daytona Coupe on July 4, 1965, clinching the championship for Shelby American. The victory was achieved despite overall race victory going to Ferrari's 365 P2 prototype, demonstrating that class-focused strategy could overcome absolute speed in championship competition. The championship celebration at Reims carried profound implications that transcended motorsport. An American constructor had won a world championship at FIA level for the first time in history. European automotive supremacy had been challenged and defeated by American engineering, wrapped in California innovation and Texas determination. The sound of Carroll Shelby's 289 Vateseconds had literally silenced Ferrari's V12 seconds in the only competition that mattered. Championship points accumulated through consistent victory. The final insult came at the Coppa Città di Enna at Pergusa on August 15, 1965. Bob Bondurant finished third overall and first in GT Plus 3.0 in a Daytona Coupe, with Jack Sears second in class, beating the final championship margin and demonstrating continued American superiority even after the title had been decided. The 1965 season statistics told the story of systematic domination that had reduced Ferrari from unstoppable force to defeated competitor. Shelby American had accumulated 90.0 championship points to Ferrari's 71.3 in the over 2,000cc GT division, a margin that reflected consistent excellence rather than isolated brilliance. Every major European circuit had witnessed American victory. Every significant endurance race had been won by Cobra Daytona Coupes, powered by 289 Ford Vateseconds. The revolution was complete. Ferrari had been silenced. The championship was decided in the pits. Carroll Shelby commanded the Cobra pit wall, while across the lane, Eugenio Dragoni directed Ferrari's red uniform mechanics with the precision that had delivered 3 consecutive GT titles. This was mechanical warfare between American innovation and Italian tradition. Phil Remington, Shelby's legendary chief engineer, known as Rem, had created Ford 289 V8 maintenance schedules that kept American engines running when European competitors failed. His systematic approach to pit organization prioritized efficiency over ceremony. Every tool placement, every crew assignment reflected American pragmatism confronting European ritual. Al Dowd, Shelby's team manager, coordinated the transatlantic logistics that made it possible for a California constructor to challenge Ferrari's factory operation on Italian soil. His European campaign organization had transported American racing capability across continents to defeat Ferrari at Monza, Nürburgring, and Reims. Charlie Agapiou, the chief mechanic closest to driver Bob Bondurant, possessed intuitive understanding of mechanical problems that could develop during 12-hour racing. His ability to diagnose 289 V8 issues through sound and vibration prevented multiple failures that could have ended championship campaigns. John Collins and Jim Culleton, the transatlantic crew specialists, had adapted American expertise to European racing conditions. Ken Miles functioned as driver-engineer, providing technical feedback that bridged cockpit experience with pit strategy. His dual perspective on the 289 V8 as both power source and mechanical system created data necessary for setup adjustments that determined race outcomes. Ferrari's response was led by Mauro Forghieri, the brilliant young engineer whose V12 maintenance protocols had established European endurance racing standards. His technical leadership represented institutional knowledge accumulated through years of championship success. Ferrari mechanics in red uniforms executed procedures perfected through multiple title campaigns, their systematic approach reflecting decades of European racing refinement. Goodyear Racing Division personnel worked directly with Shelby crews, optimizing tire performance under European conditions that differed from American requirements. Ford engineers under Ray Geddes and Jacques Passino provided technical support that enabled 289 Vateseconds to compete against sophisticated European power plants. Their presence represented corporate commitment to defeating Ferrari through engineering excellence. Driver changes created choreographed confrontations measured in seconds. Bob Bondurant exiting the Cobra cockpit while Jo Schlesser prepared to continue the championship assault required coordination practiced to mechanical precision. Across the pit lane, Ferrari drivers John Surtees, Lorenzo Bandini, and Mike Parks executed Italian efficiency that had delivered 3 championships. Weather transformed pit strategy into tactical warfare. Rain at European circuits demanded emergency setup changes where American innovation confronted European experience under conditions that could determine championship outcomes within minutes. Tire, compound selection, brake cooling adjustments, and aerodynamic configurations became battlefield decisions. The mechanical aromas of racing fuel, hot oil, and burning brakes created sensory confrontations where cultural assumptions about automotive competence were tested under ultimate competitive pressure. Communication protocols differed between American directness and European subtlety, each approach reflecting broader cultural philosophies about information management under pressure. These hidden battles determined championship success. Mechanical confrontations where Shelby's Texas determination defeated Enzo Ferrari's Italian sophistication through superior preparation and flawless execution. The pit wars where American engineering proved its capability against European competitors who had dominated through institutional excellence. Carroll Shelby's systematic innovation had silenced Ferrari's mechanical supremacy through pit strategy as much as track speed. The silence was deafening. For the first time in the history of international motorsport, the sound of American V8 seconds had drowned out the musical notes of Ferrari V12 seconds in championship competition. The 1965 FIA International Championship for GT manufacturers over 2,000 cc belonged to Shelby American, marking the first time an American constructor had claimed a world title at FIA level. The implications reverberated far beyond championship points and racing trophies. European motorsport had been built on the assumption that sophisticated engineering required European heritage, that winning cars demanded decades of racing tradition, that American automotive power was too crude for refined competition. The 289 Cobra Daytona Coupe had systematically demolished every assumption while establishing new standards for engineering excellence that transcended national boundaries. The technical triumph was measurable in specifications that had redefined competitive benchmarks. Peter Brock's aerodynamic design had increased top speed from 150 miles per hour to over 180 miles per hour, while improving high-speed stability through revolutionary airflow management. The Ford 289 small block had proven that American engines could match European reliability while delivering superior power output through systematic development and precise tuning. The marriage of British chassis sophistication with American power had created a new template for international racing success. The engineering achievement extended beyond individual components to represent a new philosophy of racing car development, where European constructors had relied on traditional approaches refined through incremental improvements. Shelby American had embraced radical innovation, guided by scientific testing and performance optimization. Wind tunnel development, systematic aerodynamic analysis, and empirical performance measurement had replaced intuition and tradition as the foundation for competitive advancement. The cultural impact was even more profound than the technical achievement. American automotive engineering had earned respect on the world stage through demonstrated superiority rather than marketing claims or political influence. European racing journalists who had dismissed the Cobras as crude hot rods were forced to acknowledge American engineering competence in terms that could no longer be qualified or minimized. British racing publications led the grudging recognition of American racing credibility. Autosport acknowledged that Shelby American had achieved something unprecedented in motorsport history, combining raw power with sophisticated engineering to create machines that exceeded European performance standards. The magazine noted that the 289 Cobra Daytona Coupe represented a new approach to racing car development that European constructors would be forced to emulate or face continued defeat. French racing journals were more defensive but equally conclusive in their recognition of American automotive superiority. L'Equipe admitted that the systematic defeat of Ferrari across European circuits had proven that American engineering could master the subtleties of endurance racing while delivering power advantages that European constructors could not match. The grudging acknowledgement represented a fundamental shift in European automotive prejudice that had dismissed American engineering for decades. German racing publications applied characteristic technical precision to analyzing the American triumph. Motorsport Total concluded that Shelby American had achieved systematic engineering superiority through methodical development and performance optimization that represented a new standard for international competition. German critics noted that the combination of American power with scientific development had created performance advantages that transcended traditional automotive hierarchies. The championship victory established American automotive credibility in markets that had previously dismissed Detroit engineering as powerful but primitive. European sports car enthusiasts who had considered American cars unsuitable for sophisticated driving began recognizing the technical merits of systematically developed American performance machines. The cultural transformation was gradual but irreversible, opening European markets to American automotive exports that had previously been considered unacceptable. Ford Motor Company recognized the commercial implications of racing success and immediately began leveraging the championship victory for marketing advantage. The same 289 V8 that had powered the championship-winning Cobras was featured prominently in Ford's advertising campaigns, emphasizing the connection between racing success and road car performance. European Ford distributors reported increased interest in American Ford models from customers who had witnessed the technical superiority of Ford engines in international competition. The championship success also provided the foundation for Ford's expanded racing ambitions. After a disastrous 1964 racing season, Ford turned the GT40 project over to Carroll Shelby and Shelby American. The decision represented Ford's recognition that Shelby's systematic approach to racing development had created capabilities that Ford's internal racing organization could not match. The transition would lead directly to Ford's domination of the 24 Hours of Le Mans from 1966 through 1969, establishing American supremacy in the most prestigious endurance race in the world. The original project had 6 Shelby Daytona Coupes built for racing purposes between 1964 and 1965, as Carroll Shelby was reassigned to the Ford GT40 project to compete at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, again to beat Ferrari in the highest level of international competition. The transition from GT championship success to prototype racing dominance demonstrated the scalability of Shelby's engineering philosophy and development methodology. The Ford GT40 program that emerged from the Cobra Championship represented the logical extension of American racing ambition. Where the 289 Cobra had proven American competitiveness in GT racing, the GT40 would establish American dominance in the highest levels of endurance racing. With driver Ken Miles, he developed the Ford GT40, the car that won the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1966, 1967, 1968, and 1969. As of 2024, it remains the only American-built car to win at Le Mans. The technical DNA of the championship-winning Cobra transferred directly to GT40 development. The systematic aerodynamic optimization, engine development methodology, and reliability testing that had delivered the GT championship became the foundation for prototype racing success. It was powered by the 4.7-liter Hypo K-Code, 289 CU and Fairlane engine with a Colati transaxle. The same basic engine architecture that had silenced Ferrari and GT competition would provide the mechanical foundation for Ford's assault on prototype racing supremacy. The influence extended beyond Ford's internal racing programs to reshape American automotive culture. The championship victory had proven that American engineering could achieve world-class performance through systematic development and scientific optimization. Detroit manufacturers began investing in racing programs not just for marketing purposes but as development laboratories for advancing automotive technology. The cultural shift from viewing racing as entertainment to recognizing competition as engineering advancement transformed American automotive development priorities. European constructors were forced to acknowledge that American engineering represented legitimate competition that demanded serious response. Ferrari began developing new GT machines specifically designed to counter American performance advantages. Porsche accelerated development of high-performance engines that could match American power output while maintaining European efficiency standards. The championship victory had forced European manufacturers to treat American competition as existential threat rather than temporary disruption. The engineering triumph also established new performance standards that elevated the entire category of GT racing. The aerodynamic efficiency achieved by the Daytona Coupe design became the benchmark that all subsequent GT cars would be measured against. The power output of the racing 289 V8 established new expectations for competitive engine performance that forced European manufacturers to abandon conservative development approaches in favor of maximum power optimization. The championship success created a legacy that transcended immediate racing results. The 6 Daytona Coupes that had delivered world championship success became automotive icons preserved in museums and celebrated as masterpieces of American engineering achievement. The turning point came with the Daytona Coupe, a handmade supercar that would put America at the forefront of sports car racing. The recognition extended beyond automotive enthusiasts to encompass broader cultural appreciation for American technological achievement on the world stage. The sound of American Veit-Seconds celebrating victory at Monza, Nürburgring, and Reims had become the mechanical soundtrack of a cultural revolution. European motorsport would never again dismiss American engineering as crude or unsophisticated. The 289 Cobra Daytona Coupe had not simply won a championship. It had established American automotive credibility on the world stage while providing the foundation for continued dominance that would reshape international motorsport for decades. Ferrari had been silenced, but the echo of American engine thunder would reverberate through racing history forever. The French countryside was quiet now. The crowds had departed Reims, the mechanics had loaded their equipment, and the official ceremonies had concluded. But the sound lingered in the champagne vineyards surrounding the Circuit de Reims. The mechanical roar of Bob Bondurant's 289 V8 crossing the finish line as GT class winner had become the soundtrack of automotive revolution. July 4th, 1965 had delivered American independence in motorsport. The drivers who carried American credibility on their shoulders that season represented more than individual talent. They were cultural ambassadors proving that American automotive engineering deserved respect on the world stage. Bondurant emerged as the championship hero, delivering crucial victories at Sebring, Monza, Nürburgring, and the title-clinching triumph at Reims. His partnership with Jo Schlesser created an international alliance that demonstrated racing excellence transcended national boundaries. Jack Sears and John Whitmore had proven British drivers could extract maximum performance from American power at Monza and throughout the European campaign. Jochen Nierpasch brought German precision to the Nürburgring victory. Harold Keck and Bob Johnson provided essential support at Daytona. Each driver contributed to a collective achievement that established American automotive competence through demonstrated performance rather than marketing claims. The 6 Daytona Coupes that delivered world championship success have become automotive artifacts preserved in museums as monuments to American engineering achievement. CSX 2287 became the first vehicle added to the Historic Vehicle Association's National Historic Vehicle Register and the first automobile recorded under the United States Secretary of the Interior Standards for Heritage Documentation in the Library of Congress. The first of just 6 built remains in original, unrestored condition at the Simeone Foundation Automotive Museum. These machines represent more than preserved racing cars. They are tangible proof that American engineering could achieve world-class performance through systematic innovation and relentless development. Museums from California to Colorado now celebrate Carroll Shelby's legacy through collections that showcase the championship-winning Cobras alongside GT40s and Shelby Mustangs. Visitors who examine these cars discover the technical sophistication that Europeans had dismissed as impossible from American constructors. The cultural transformation extended far beyond the automotive industry. European perception of American technological capability had been fundamentally altered by the systematic defeat of Ferrari across multiple circuits and racing conditions. The 289 Cobra's success established a precedent that American engineering could compete at the highest levels of international competition when guided by scientific methodology and performance optimization. The championship victory created ripple effects that reshaped American motorsport development for decades. Detroit manufacturers began treating racing programs as legitimate engineering laboratories rather than marketing exercises. The success demonstrated that competition could drive technological advancement that benefited both racing performance and road car development. American automotive engineering gained confidence to challenge European assumptions across multiple categories of competition. The technical innovations that delivered championship success became industry standards that influenced automotive development worldwide. Peter Brock's aerodynamic optimization methodology established new approaches to body design that prioritized performance over traditional styling conventions. The systematic development of the Ford 289 V8 for endurance competition created reliability standards that transferred directly to road car applications. The engineering philosophy that guided Shelby American's championship campaign represented a new approach to automotive development that combined American pragmatism with scientific precision. Wind tunnel testing, empirical performance measurement, and systematic optimization replaced intuition and tradition as the foundation for competitive advancement. European constructors were forced to adopt similar methodologies or face continued defeat by American engineering efficiency. The silence that descended over Ferrari's GT program after the 1965 championship represented more than temporary competitive disadvantage. It marked the end of European monopoly on sophisticated racing car development and the beginning of genuine international competition based on engineering merit rather than cultural prejudice. The prancing horse would recover and win future championships, but never again would European superiority be assumed rather than proven. The sound of those 289 V8 seconds celebrating victory at Monza had become the dominant voice of cultural change. European racing fans who had considered American cars unsuitable for sophisticated competition were forced to acknowledge that raw power combined with systematic development could overcome decades of racing tradition. The crowd reactions at European circuits throughout the 1965 season documented the gradual acceptance of American automotive competence. The championship's success established Carroll Shelby as more than a successful constructor. He became the architect of American racing credibility, the individual who proved that systematic engineering could overcome established hierarchies and cultural assumptions. His transition from Texas chicken farmer to world champion constructor represented the American dream realized through automotive excellence and international competition. The legacy extends beyond historical achievement to encompass ongoing influence on contemporary automotive development. Modern American manufacturers continue to leverage racing success for commercial advantage, following the template established by Shelby's championship campaign. The connection between competition, performance, and road car credibility remains fundamental to American automotive marketing strategy. The 6 championship-winning Daytona Coupes, preserved in museums, serve as permanent monuments to a moment when American automotive engineering achieved world recognition through demonstrated superiority. Each car represents thousands of hours of development work, countless test miles, and the collective efforts of mechanics, engineers, and drivers who refuse to accept European assumptions about American automotive limitations. The technical DNA of the championship-winning Cobras lives on in contemporary American performance cars that continue to challenge European competitors through superior power output and systematic development. The engineering philosophy that guided the 1965 championship campaign established principles that remain relevant to modern automotive competition and development. The transformation was complete and irreversible. European motorsport publications that had dismissed American racing ambitions as crude entertainment were forced to acknowledge systematic engineering superiority that demanded serious response from traditional European constructors. The Cultural Revolution, initiated by 6 Daytona Coupes, powered by 289 Ford V8 seconds, had established new standards for international automotive competition. As darkness fell over the Reims circuit that Independence Day evening in 1965, the sound of American V8 seconds faded into mechanical history. But the silence they had imposed on Ferrari's racing program would echo through decades of motorsport development. The balance of power in world racing had shifted permanently, established through championship points earned by systematic engineering excellence rather than cultural assumption. In 1965, the Shelby 289 Cobra did more than win a championship. It silenced Ferrari and rewrote the balance of power in world motorsport.